Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from up north here in Whangarei Heads by Cameron Tukapua. Thank you, Cameron, so much for being once again a guest here on this show. And for everybody that is listening or watching to us, can you share a little bit about you if they didn't hear, because we already did an episode 2 years ago almost, but if people didn't hear the episode, can you share a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, I am a passionate seeker. So I came to the path of spiritual life inquiry consciously when I was 21. I went to a party one night and I was introduced to somebody who was really fun, and we had these really stimulating conversations, and she turned out to be a teacher at the acupuncture college in Brisbane, where I was living at the time. And she was so interesting and so much fun that night. And then she said, "Do you want to come to an open day tomorrow? We're having an open day. And come and find out more." And I said, "Oh, okay, So I was 21, wild and free, a little bit lost and a little bit searching. And off I went with her the next day. We drove down to Brisbane. I found myself in this funky old building in the middle of downtown city, upstairs, and creaky old, setup. And I walked into this space. There were about 60 people in the room, and I started hearing what I would say is just the truth. I started hearing how everything in life is energy and it's all interconnected, and that we are energy, and that there is a natural way of being that is akin to the ways of nature, and that when we become more at ease with ourselves and in flow with our energy, we stay healthy. And if we get out of balance with our energy, we get sick. So in my early life, I grew up on a farm. So discovering a medicine that was based on nature was really exciting for me, because I thought, yeah, this makes sense. Of course we should follow the ways of nature. Of course we are nature. Of course there is a natural way of life, and that we are showing up and influencing how life works. And when we know a little bit more about how to show up in our natural way of being, then we have more fun. Very important to me. And, life is a wee bit lighter because we can see how everything is connected. And if there's stuff that's happening outside of us that feels a bit weird and wonky, we have some ways of looking at that help us understand. So then that settles the mind down. So for me, as I say, I was a little bit lost. I was looking for direction and not really finding the right kind of career or, something that was really grabbing me. And as soon as I heard about acupuncture and Chinese medicine, boom, I was just hooked. And I've loved it every day since. And now these days, so that's 40 years ago that I started up, the teaching people how to see themselves as part of this interconnected energy system, and how to find balance for themselves by listening to their own heart and their own knowing. That's the natural extension of my practice, and I'm really passionate about that.
Yes, so beautiful. And for everyone listening, Cameron is one of the first people that I met here in New Zealand when I came almost 8 years ago. And I can't believe that it's been so long now. And we started you being you as a way of, being able to share some of this ancient wisdom and some of the different ways of living. And now for the last 3 years, since we recorded the previous episode, which is one of the first ones on this podcast, for anybody that wants to go and listen to Cameron sharing more about her story there. Cameron wrote this book that for everybody watching it now, this episode, Heartfelt Living, I have this copy here with me. So can you share, Cameron, a little bit about, why heartfelt living and what is, the message that you want to bring into the world, and how was the process as well for you to write this?
Wow. Well, what is heartfelt living? For me, it's living aligned with what feels good and true and beautiful and natural to us, and with what feels right. And I think that instinctively we know the heart is, really important, but we don't know why. So in Chinese medicine, it is described as a supreme controller. So it's the ruler of the mind. It's the ruler and harmonizer of emotions. It's harmonizes our inner world, how we feel inside ourselves, what we're thinking about, how we're feeling, what's alive for us, so we can sense with our heart what's going on for us. So I call that awareness. And then when we're living aware and then awake, so when we're awake to what's happening outside us, so we can see what's happening in the world around us, we can sense how people are and the environment near us, then we know how to be in relationship to that situation and that person and that experience. And I feel that one of the big challenges of today's insane world, because we can't call this sane, is that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. So if you haven't heard that term before and you think about resonance, so resonance is like a harmony, a harmonious frequency, and dissonance is the opposite. So it's a really disconnected, chaotic sort of energy that surrounds us. It's like weather. So we're living in a world now where the surround sound is very discombobulated. So unless our own center is much stronger than that, then we're going to be pulled out of our own true, good, beautiful state of balance and well-being and, pulled along by whatever's happening out there. So I wrote this book as a response to watching this insane time kick off, 20 years ago, I would say, and the increasing insanity, which we call the mental health crisis. And for me, that's a spiritual health crisis, because the spirit of awareness guides the mind.
Yeah.
So when we are light and clear and awake and aware, there's a light that shines through the mind so we can see what's happening. And then we feel more able to make good decisions, choose the right pathways, judge how to respond to a situation. We know how to be in harmonious relationship with what's happening out there. And at this point in history, because there's so much mad stuff happening out there, it's very, very hard to know how to be in relationship to that. And so there's a lot of collective confusion, which is actually a healthy, normal response to a lot of insanity.
This is something that you often talk about, and that I think that it's so on point that, a lot of people that don't, like, they feel ungrounded, they feel imbalanced, they feel like, they're a little bit not stable. And it's like, well, that is, like, as you're saying, that's a natural response to what's going on around them.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, what do we do as individuals to be able to, as you're saying, to be able to actually be in relationship to that? And then as a collective, then creating the changes that we can, so that that comes back to a place of balance, which, I mean, the only thing a lot of times, at least for me, and why, like, it's all of the time coming back to the individual, is I know that I can do something about my experience. I don't know now how much of that impact is going to have in the collective. I know that it's having an impact in the collective, but I know that by myself, I cannot change everything, and I cannot change anyone else. So what I can do is I can take that responsibility, as you're saying, being able to resonate with something and connect more, and to be able to understand, as you're saying, all of these different ways that actually are going to keep us in that grounded space, even in the midst of all of that chaos.
Yeah. 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 And I think you've hit the nail on the head. Self-responsibility is the key here, because because we're in this collective narrative about COVID and, government staff and directives, and there are all a lot more controls around human freedoms and things now. There's a suggestion that somebody else writes the narrative, and that we are inside that story, and the story is directing us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet what we know in ancient wisdom teachings is that we are co-creators of life and energy, that life, and this is borne out by quantum theories and, modern science and stuff now, that we know life is interactive. And therefore, we are all contributing to this change just by the way we're being. So as you say, Brian, you can't shift everybody, the whole situation, or change someone else, because that's not our job. We all have free will. We choose what we need to do. But we can shift our own state. And by doing that, we sort of feed the field of harmony and resonance.
Mm.
So there's like a ripple effect from that. And there's some statistics, I don't know, because I'm not very science-minded, but something like about, 1% of people who are, orienting around this, you might know this, Brian, that can shift the whole field.
Yeah.
Because the harmonious frequency is the original energy of life. And how do we see that and know that's true as we look to nature? So irregardless of humans behaving as insanely as they are right now, nature still, sun gets up every day, it goes down every day, the rain comes, things grow, so we come back to that stable influence, which has been, the guiding light for this planet for, millennia, multi-million years, and us little humans haven't been here that long. So coming back to that original nature is the most important thing for us, just like return to base.
Yeah.
And if we can orient around that baseline and do whatever it is that we personally need to get that baseline and maintain it, then we are making a massive contribution to healing the whole.
Mm.
And for me, it's a lot about the mind. I grew up where there was quite a bit of mental stuff in the background of my family. And so really early on, I got really aware, like, I need to learn how to control my mind and steer it properly.
Mm.
So for me, learning how to see this time is why I wrote this book. It's like, what's going on out there? How do we look at that and make sense of it, and also step away from the nonsense of it? So there's a lot of nonsense in the world now, and people get anxious when they can't understand something. So anxiety is at epidemic levels because a lot of what we're experiencing as a surround sound is nonsense.
Yeah.
It's complete rubbish. So a lot of my work with my clients is helping them, recognize, don't try to fight that. That's too big, right? When you're around nonsense, step away from the insanity. Like, take a step back, put a big boundary and an edge around that person, that situation, and put your attention somewhere else.
Mm. Yeah.
Because chaotic energy and insanity is very distressing. And as I said in the beginning, unless you're super anchored, it's hard not to wobble around with that. So it's better to keep that over there and you sort of put your attention over here.
Yeah. And, as you're saying, and, this is something that through the years we've had so many conversations with this, but there's a lot of things in what you said that I think is so important. One is the reorientation of our perspectives and the narratives that we are believing, and taking that radical self-responsibility, and to understand, as you're saying, we are those co-creators, and that we don't necessarily need to be victims of our circumstances. We can be that co-creator and the master of our experience. And we master our experience by understanding all of this, by understanding that it's possible, which for majority of the population, they don't know that that's the case. But especially in the last few years, there's been more and more and more people awakening. And this is why, like on your book, especially, as like this is the pathways for people that are awakening, because people are awakening, but they don't know what to do. And this is, and the work that we do within this space is like, sharing with people. There are pathways, there's different ways. It's not that for everyone it's going to be the same, but there are pathways, there are practices, there are ways of being and doing things that are going to support as you start to realize, wow, what's going on around me is actually really imbalanced and out of alignment, and how am I in relationship with that? And I love what you said, because I think that one of the biggest things as well is the boundaries, is understanding what are our boundaries and how can we communicate them, and how do we actually take care of ourselves. Like boundaries, a lot of times I think that the way that I see it, it's actually a self-care practice. It's not about pushing other people away or being like, unkind to others. It's actually about being kind to oneself.
Yeah, beautiful point. Yeah, and I think that a lot of these ideas, we hear them about them a lot in many different contexts, like the concept of boundaries. And yet understanding what they mean and applying them to our own lives, that's the piece we need to empower us to take these tools and teachings and apply them to our own life. So, for example, I talk a lot about the power of presence. And if we're having difficulty in a situation, like a relationship, for example, maybe you're having a difficulty with someone at work. So at work, when you show up, when you bring your presence into that relationship, you are in the role of co-worker. And so the co-worker's role has certain responsibilities. Just like if you're at home and you're in the role of father, the father has certain responsibilities. So when we show up and role, we know how to respond to what's happening out there. And if we're not sure about our boundaries, that's one of the simplest, fastest ways to get clear about them. When we are in a situation where boundaries are going to support us, we need to ask ourselves, how am I presencing myself in this situation? What am I showing up to? And what am I showing up through? Am I someone's friend? Am I their client? Am I a practitioner? Am I a sister? Am I a co-worker? How do I want to presence myself in this situation according to the role? Because if I understand the role, I understand the rules. And a lot of the rules of relationship are not communicated, they're unconscious. And so somebody will be showing up as a friend, so I find this in my clinical practice, like very rarely do I make friends with the people that I treat. There's a few little ones here and there, but mostly there's always a sense of separation, because they need me to be there for them in that role, and I need to stay in the role to serve them best in my role as practitioner. If we become too friendly, then the contract and the nature of the exchange becomes blurry. So lots of the roles we have in our life, especially familial roles and familiar roles, like when we're really friendly with someone, we can easily go too far in a situation. Or when we're in a family situation where we are now, 30-year-old, and our parents are still treating us like 10 years old, then we need to update the sense of what's the role about now. And, getting clear about boundaries, the simplest way to do that is just ask ourselves, how do I need to show up in this situation? Like, what's my role? And I just made a video about the Queen because I was literally, as you know, Brian, I was literally on the day I was planning to tell the world about the book, the Queen died the same few hours. So I thought, oh, okay, well, stop the plans and step away. And I was interested in pausing to honor her, because I think she's a great soul who occupied a great role. So her presence in the world was very powerful. She had a lot of potency. When she showed up, people sat up and people were honored by her presence. In many cases, people were brought together by her presence. So she had this unifying power because she showed up in service to something very, very, very higher than herself. And interestingly, across the years, she was criticized for not showing her soft side or not showing up like a mother or whatever. But she was not there for the public to show up in that role. She showed up as the Queen. So she was very clear about her role, and she had a lot of power because of that clarity. So when we are clear about our role, we can come forward and presence ourselves in our life and our world feeling empowered, because the power comes through clarity and it's contained through the boundaries. The boundaries are a container for power, and most people who have a lot of power, who are at risk of abusing power, such as medical professionals, legal professionals, financial professionals, there's lots and lots of rules that govern the behavior of these people, govern the way those roles are managed. So the more power we have, the more rules and clarity about the role we need. And I think one of the challenges in our world today is that we have a lot of people in positions of great power, but they're not great souls. So they're not here serving a highest good. They're not here to add a unifying, harmonizing power to the people presence. And so a lot of people are feeling overpowered by these, authorities who are using their power to rule the little people. And I think the upside of that is the little people are saying no. We all have power, and we're moving into the Aquarian age, which is all about group power and grassroots energy, grassroots change, innovation, bring in the new, using technologies, using, original ideas to solve old world problems, because the old world problems need a whole new approach. And that's where we're heading. We're moving through that tunnel of in between. It's a bit dark and scary right now, but that's where it's heading.
Yeah, that space, as you're saying, that space that we're navigating, that is the space of the unknown. For a lot of people, unless you know how to navigate the unknown, it's a really scary place to be. Yet it's so powerful as well because, in the unknown, there's a lot of this potential. So I think that, it's a wonderful time if we are able to ride those waves and to dance with all of these changes that are happening, unless, like we are not, and then those waves just come crushing us, like, and pushing us down, and it's like, oh wow, what's going on? But I want to go back to like what you were talking about presence and about how you're showing up, because as well, this episode is going to come out just before Christmas, and for a lot of people, this is a really stressful time. For a lot of people, this is a beautiful time coming together with the family, and for a lot of people, this is the worst time because they need to show up with the family, and they don't know how to, like, those interactions and those family dynamics are so challenging. That I think it's so important to actually ask those questions that you said, like, how do I need to show up? What's my role? And, what are the boundaries that need to be put into place in that space? So for those people that perhaps, are going to go soon to their families and to all of these, holidays, what would you share with them as a few things to be aware of?
That's a really great invitation there, Brian. I would say, number one, be aware that we're in a very inflammatory zone. People's emotions are heightened. We're at the end of the year, so people are tired. We're a little bit worn down by all these changes. So in Chinese medicine, we say health is our ability to adapt to change. So when we've had so much change coming at us, fast and furious, we get sort of worn down by it. So therefore, people like some anchor points, some stability points. So if you can, look for how do you bring your most anchored presence forward? Like when you are thinking about being an anchor in your family situation and for yourself, how do you show up? Like, what do you show up with? So for me, I'm a very Uranian individual. Like I come into a space, and if I'm in a big expansive mood, I fill the space. So when I go to my family, I get very aware of showing up in my gentle spirit, which is a big, strong part of me too. Like I show up with a gentle presence. I show up with less talking and more listening. So I intend for myself to be that way. And in that way, I'm not adding stress to an already stressed, tired situation. And I think a lot of us are in that position, like we're at the end of the year, it's tired, a little bit of stress. And if you've got family, raru, then a simple practice you can use is the Ho'oponopono mantra. So that's a kahuna practice from the traditional people of Hawaii. And you basically, whenever you think of someone who you're having some difficulty with, you just project them these 4 thoughts. And you just say it in your mind. You don't have to say it out loud. You can say it out loud if you're by yourself, but if you're with them, you can just be projecting and saying these four lines like, I love you. So you're sending them love. You're recognizing, if we're in this little soul group family together, then you can guarantee there's some stuff we've got to learn from each other, because our soul bonds and soul families, they are there to evolve us. Some of what we're needing to do there is evolve beyond the family patterning. And to get past that, we've got to kind of, rise up ourselves. So the Ho'oponopono mantra is a really powerful, simple way of shifting into a higher state. So we send them, I love you. I'm sorry. So when we say I'm sorry to someone, we're acknowledging something's a little bit off here and I'm sorry about that. please forgive me. So you're sending and asking for forgiveness in the etheric field. You're putting that out into the energy of the gathering and saying, like, forgive me on behalf of all the people who have hurt you. You're probably triggering into hurt that's nothing to do with me. But I'm going to be the one to say, please forgive me. Like, let's open up that pathway of forgiveness between us. So we're not hanging on to all our old hurts and defending them for whatever, so we can win. So the ego loves to win, loves to be right, it's very, very serious about everything. So whenever we're, getting into tricky territory with family and things like that, we might feel like, but they don't understand me. So I want to be right? Wrong. It's like, let yourself be wrong. Like, it's okay. Oftentimes with family, we need to recognize we're still a 10-year-old in their minds, even though we're 35, 42, 58, doesn't matter. We're still operating out of those old childlike dynamics. So not everybody is choosing to evolve beyond the starting place. So we need to get real and update our expectations about what we can actually expect with our family. Like if we've, had a year of spiritual transformations and awakenings, and they are mostly focused on, saving up for a new car, they're not so likely to understand our, achievements of 2022. So it's like, dial down your expectations, put that loving energy into the space. And if you can't do that, just have a short amount of time with them. Don't say much, tone yourself down and get out of there as fast as you can.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I've been telling a lot of people that I'm seeing. Like, actually, one of my friends, and like, she was like, it's too much, and she just like booked for a 10-day retreat. She's not going to go to her family gathering because it was too much, and she just wanted the peace. And I'm like, that's great. And
Yep.
and I think that, as you're saying, it's about understanding, and as well understanding, what you're saying, that I think it's so important, understanding how they are seeing you as well, because I know this from, like, a lot of times from my childhood friends. When I started to change, they kept on seeing me as the same little kid as I used to be, and I'm like, that's not me anymore. But that's the eyes that they saw me through. So I need to understand as well. Well, that's what they are seeing. As you're saying, if someone is, so focused on perhaps work or money or something that I might not be, it's like, well, like, I need to understand that's what they're focusing on. So there's, like, their perspective is going to be about that. And yes, they might be judging me, but in a sense, I am judging them as well. So
That's right.
as you're saying, the Ho'oponopono is interesting to get to get a little bit to that place of softness, and to be able to recognize, as you're saying, like, that the ego wants to be right. Like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know exactly the perspectives that they are bringing. I don't know the stress that they are coming with. I don't know what's going on entirely in their lives. So, that having a space for compassion and for, like, forgiveness, or for gratitude, and then seeing, well, like, this is actually, at this time, perhaps this is not going to serve me at all, then stepping back, either fully or partly, or saying, like, well, like, this is a chance for me to put into practice all of these things that I've been learning. This is one of the things that with a lot of my clients, I say, well, this is the biggest test, like, sitting down in meditation in my room by myself, that's easy. Now staying balanced and not getting triggered in family like holidays, that's the test.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just aware, so that for everybody listening, can you repeat the Ho'oponopono 4, because I think that you went through 3 of them.
So, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. So when you say I love you, you're acknowledging there's that big love energy that's there in the background of our lives, that's unifying, healing, harmonizing all the energies. So I love you. I'm just going to extend that energy into the field. Let me be the one to say, I'm sorry. Sorry for all the hurt you've ever experienced. Please forgive me. On behalf of all the people who've ever hurt you, please forgive me. And then when we say thank you, we're going, okay, over to you, universe. And we're also saying thank you for this relationship, acknowledging, that we need to be grateful for all the relationships in our life, even as much the testy ones, because they're our teacher. We can feel quite enlightened by ourselves.
Yes.
You come into a relationship, boom, there's the test. How enlightened are you? And when we repeat that stanza, we're putting all that into the field between us. So I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And then we just let it go. So what I do if I'm running a lot of charge on an emotion with someone, then I'll just repeat it. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And let that burn up the emotion. Like if you're running a bit of, just say it a few times and give it that energy, like put that energy into those mantras. And then after a few times, that's it. You're done.
Yeah, what you just said, like the way that I learned about mantras is understanding mantras are an antidote for the mind when it's just going. So as you're saying, like using this mantra of Ho'oponopono or anything, like I remember one of the like teachers of Ho'oponopono that I met many years ago, and she said, like, get the vibration. If those words don't work for you based on your upbringing, or they don't work for you based on your culture or your religion, like just connect with the energy that is and put your own words, or just without the words, just the intention of that, of showing up and being, like loving, compassionate, and in that gratitude energy, that is a high vibration, and all of that is actually going to lessen everything else that is on the way. So as you're repeating that, as you're saying, that as a practice is wonderful, whether you want to use this, for concepts, or you want to use anything else, being able to actually master your mind, and that is the key there.
Sure is.
I
think, the biggest tip for mastering the mind is give it a rest. Right? So many people are addicted to filling the mind and stimulating the mind, online, the phone, online, incoming. The biggest way to take care of your mental health is stop the incoming. Put some boundaries around your mental space and your thought space. Give yourself some thinking time off. Go out into nature. Like I've noticed, being the Asian stage I am and watching the increase of, like I was around when they had the original, what they call it, Walkman.
Yes, I remember.
Was that like
that.
the 90s or something?
Yes,
not sure. Like
80s and 90s.
Little thing. And that was the first time we had portable sound. And now we've got, buds, right? So I live in one of the most beautiful places in the entire world. I go down to do my practice in the morning, and it's not uncommon for me to see a runner with earbuds. Like they're running in paradise and listening to something at the same time. So, I get it. Like, it's an add to the experience. And this is one of the things we've done is we've got sensory overload at this point for many, many people. So the nervous system, which doesn't recognize the difference between imagination and so-called reality, it's stimulated by sound, stimulated by visual input. So if you're online all day and you're listening to stuff all day, the nervous system is, ramping up. So very rarely do I encounter people in my clinic who can just lie down and have a rest. They rest less. So I've watched this develop. And I remember my teacher in the year 2000, we were at a meditation thing, and she was saying, watch out for sound pollution. She was alluding to us then, that was in 2000, and how there were sounds coming everywhere. Like in the old days, you'd go to the library, there was no sound. Like it was hush. You go to sit on the plane, like there's no sound on the planes, no music when you get into the plane. And you know, go into public spaces, go to the malls, there's sound. So there's just so much coming at us sensory-wise, and that's stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxing calm, it responds to quiet, stillness, sleep, right? So if you can't sleep, it's because that system's too revved up. So in Chinese medical terms, you're over yang, you know, your yang energy is just overstimulated. So the remedy for chaos and madness and busyness is to slow it all down and to turn off your devices and have, you know, 4 hours a day where you don't have them, you don't pick them up, you know, have a day a month where you don't have any of it. Like, shut it all down, because that stimulation is what's revving everybody up. And we've lost the capacity to just, you know, return to peaceful state and just chill.
Yeah. You know, like I had a few times in the last few years, feeling like a fish out of water in public spaces when, you know, like, oh, and of course I use my phone, I use computer, but a lot of times I am there and I'm just, you know, like being in the space, or, you know, like being on a bus or a train, and instead of being on my phone, it's like I'm just there. And it's like, and I see some people kind of like this, you know, like looking at me, and I'm like, do they think that I'm weird, or like, you know, like what's the thought process going on there? Because, you know, like it's like I saw this image the other time that it said, like, there was the image of this kid on a bus and he was reading an actual book, and everybody else on the bus had a cell phone, and the subtitle on the image said, "A rare sighting of an endangered species." And it's
True.
But it is, this is the capacity to understand as well, you know, like, okay, yes, it's stimulating, and yes, we're getting that dopamine hit all of the time. How can we understand the power of that self-regulation, the power of not being in that state all of the time? Because then we are living in constant state of fight or flight or freeze, and that's unhelpful, for our life as we navigate, but as well for our system. And therefore, like, you know, like if we keep on being there, that's a lot of the issues that we are seeing. You're seeing them in the clinic, you know, like we're seeing them everywhere, and people don't know how to be with that. So it's like, the more that we're able to understand the importance of just slowing down, just being in nature, understand, you know, like being with someone. And even though now we're talking through the computer, it's like being there with that person, and like, and giving your presence. This is something that we talk often, and you talk often, as you said before, you know, like being present, like your presence as a gift, and just being there for one another, and not having to be like distracted. And it can be, yes, like we know, we only have 1 hour, so we have that boundary, but during that 1 hour, it's like, are we actually present or not? So,
did you say something, Brian?
No, I was just pausing.
Sorry, I wasn't there present.
But, you know, it's
exactly. And presence is an honoring, you know, like when we show up for people and truly show up, you know, this is when we anchor our powers. We go back to the Queen, right? So the Queen showed up. She showed up every day, you know, to thousands and thousands of people, going to watch people, you know, who grew the first plants in England or whatever, or going to look at somebody's prized dog, Maine or whatever, you know. So, but she showed up. And so that energy of showing up, it is a way that we honor ourselves and each other. And if we're showing up with a +1, so I call this +1. So +1 is either like a, you know, a device, a bud, or a in our head about how we're coming into the space. When we just show up as ourselves, like here I am today with you, me and the water bottle and you, then all of my energy is available for receiving you and connecting with you. And we have a more meaningful exchange, and the energy is alive and it finds its own flow. And so we can find our way back to balance just by showing up with a bit more awakeness to what's happening out there and awareness of what's happening in here. And this is tricky because at the moment, like a lot of us are going through a lot of energetic upgrades, right? So we could be experiencing strange things in the body. We can experience, some high intensity feelings, stuff coming up, high, busyness in the head that we just can't shut down. So these sorts of intense moments of experience that a lot of us are feeling are a response to the energy upgrade that we're all going through right now. Like we are shifting, the frequency of our energy is shifting. And the remedy for that is, creating more space. We need more space around us for the integration of these changes. So my teacher, Angela Aaron, she talked about how, you can shift like that, but the integration of that shift takes the time.
Mm.
And I know how, teaching and, doing events and things like that and coaching in my clinic, people have these aha moments, and having that aha moment land into action and change in our world, that takes a little bit of time. So in a way, many of us right now, we're going through some big ahas about things that we know we want to change, and we are aware there's another world awaiting for us. There's other possibilities, a more expanded life for ourselves and the people around us. And coming into that energy consciously and embracing it and, paddling with this big swell that we're in right now, it's going to be much easier to catch the wave. But to do that, we've got to be awake and aware. Mm. And that's a heartfelt space.
Yeah.
Right? The heart rules awareness of what's going on inside us, what's going on outside us, what's we've been called to do. So the soul is there as our guide when we know how to listen to it. And learning how to attune to these subtle energies is much easier to do when we get rid of the +1. Mm. If we've got other people coming into our space all the time in the form of, stimulation, songs, music, Facebook, whatever, if we're full of other ideas about life, we have to filter them. And if our filter's full, which it is for a lot of people because there's been so much stuff coming at us, it's tiring. Mm. So back to that boundaries, we put some boundaries around that stuff, like have less incoming.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I talk a lot with some of my students, and one of the things that I shared recently was I shared a lot about, like, as you're saying, listen to the heart or listen to what your body's telling you, and taking action in life based on how your body speaks. But as you're saying, the majority of the people have no idea how their bodies speak. They have no idea how to actually listen to their hearts. All they are doing is listening either to their heads or to everything else, all of those, as you're saying, those +1s. So I think that it's really important to be able to take the time to do that exploration into how does my heart speak to me? Like, how does that feel? Or is it, how does it compare to my head? How does it compare to my gut or to my womb? Like being able to actually be curious and explore and experiment, to be able to be in that space of, okay, this is my head. This is actually, my mom in my head, or my dad in my head, or my grandpa, or someone, like from church or whatever it is that is the voices in your head that we've been conditioned with. So when we're able to show up from a heart place, it's so different. And I know this, you were mentioning a few times the queen, and from a head perspective, for me, the queen represents a lot of the things that are really bad. So my relationship or my way of seeing her is quite negative in terms of the, colonialism, and in terms of what she did for not British, like for like a lot of the rest. But from a heart perspective, I know, like, well, is that helpful? Harboring that, keeping that going, is that going to change anything? Or can I actually just understand, well, she held the position, which was, as you're saying, quite powerful and quite big, and the presence was everywhere in the world, whether we judge it positive or negative. And can I just understand, well, that was something that happened. Can I show up with love? Because also that was her role. And that was like what was happening in time and space as well. So can I show up accordingly to what the situations need? And can I show up from a place of compassion and a place that is connected to that heart energy, so that I can move on and then we can move on? And, like, we can actually do this as a society. But as we keep on having this more and more separation and antagonism, this is harder and harder a lot of times. So it's actually quite a big practice to be able to hold someone in your heart or with compassion when they are, trying to pick a fight all of the time, or, trying to control or whatever, and to be able to come back to the heart and to be able to like care for ourselves. That's a path in itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think with other people, how we come into relationship with other people, we almost always consider context and what's appropriate. So the heart is the judge of what's appropriate, so sometimes people are behaving badly and it's inappropriate. So that's when we have the boundaries and we say, no, we're not having you near. We can have compassion for them behaving inappropriately, but we don't want them anywhere near us, because that's a more compassionate take on us. And my kind of takeaway from the Queen's passing is that she was the external figurehead of heart energy. Yeah. And she has reigned, over the world for 80 years or whatever it is. And she's gone. There's not going to be another queen for some time, if there is one. And yet we have our own queen inside us. The queen of our being is our heart. And when we listen to our own knowing and our own truth and align with that, then we naturally form more real relationships with others. And that is our guide for those relationships. Like, maybe my relationship with that person is not as close as it once used to be, because what we stand for, what we believe in, what our truths are, they're quite different at this point. So I think one of the gifts of all the separation and discrimination and disconnection is that it's really helping us see, who do I want to connect with? Like, who are my people? Like, where do I want to give my time and energy? And how do I, stand up in my presence, in my power, in my truth, and come forward from there? So when we show up to life and live by the heart, we live present time forward. We're not referencing back. So I feel one of the big changes of this time, that's a real gift of this time, is that we're going to wake up, right? Like, we can't sleep through this time. There's too much going on. And if we want to create a new life for ourselves and our world, when we, all of us, show up and really presence ourselves of what's important to us, which is a heartfelt, knowing, then we bring our energy and our power and our potency into life, and we can connect with whoever's around us and create from that space. So we're moving present time forward. And I think one of the real gifts of this time is, as a collective, we're awakening. And as a collective, we get to see how painful it is to be traumatized, to have, horrible dramas of emotions and upsets, and how the trauma drama reference point of the past, it's not much fun. Right? It's a drag, and it's old, tired energy. So we're leaving behind an old, tired time, and we're shifting into a time when it's time to wake up, that we are each power points on this planet. We all come from the same source. Deep down at heart, we're all the same. And when we claim our power and potency to contribute to the world in a way that's healing and holding and aligning with goodness, truth, and beauty, we shift what's happening. And when we unite with the people around us that, are standing in that same place, who are honoring their truths and, living by their own moral compass, then we start to feel better about who we are, and we feel stronger, because oftentimes the people who are sensitive to these subtle energies, they've developed that sensitivity because they come from trauma. They've come from, backgrounds of lack of safety and disconnection and separation. And so they understand it deeply. We understand it deeply. I've come from that in some ways. So what I understand is I don't want that reality. I want to choose to live in conscious harmony with people around me. And if the people that I'm in with aren't up for that, then I'm going to step away, because I want that. And I want to live in a world based on that, which is why I do what I do, So for the ever since Brian and I met, I've been forging pathways, healing pathways online, teaching people about, this is where you come from. Here's your power. Here's your potency. Here's some ways to embrace it. Here's some ways to nurture it. Here's some ways to get into flow with your big potency. Because this time is asking all of us to wake up to our big spirit, we're capable of so much, and our soul is our guiding compass. It communicates as intuition. It comes through the heart. The soul as the guide and the compass. When it's paired up with the heart, awake, aware, present, then we can navigate, by the deepest part of ourselves. And, my calling at this time is making those teachings available, making them very easy to connect with and experience, because I feel like a lot of people are lost, especially young people. Not especially young people, actually. A lot of young people are really clear and aware they don't want to be part of what that old energy is. It's like, no way do I want to be part of that. And yet what else is there? So seeking we find, and when we commit to our path and our practice, whatever it is, if you have a practice, lean into it. Because when you cultivate that inner energy, it helps you wake up to what's important to you, and you can orient around that. So it's very important that we do regular practice. So my teacher said it this way, that our practices are like containers for the energy. We practice and practice and practice, so our container's really strong, and then we've got plenty of energy. And so then if something comes along that's a bit intense and needs a lot of energy, we've got some reserve power. So practice helps build up reserves of power and reserves of stability. And a lot of the people that I see have no reserves. They're emptied out because of the stress of this time and worry and the trauma. And you can get overwhelmed by over-identifying with the bigness of this, or you can come back to the small and go, okay, well, now's the entry point. I need to learn about myself, what I need to take care of me, find some like-minded souls that get off on this, and we can share each and learn from each other and connect and, have community. And then we become capable of serving the big spirit that's trying to come through all of us. The big spirit's behind this change. Can seem a bit scary because there's some very insane leaders in the mix. And yet, the power of the insanity, it's going to fall over. It has to. It's not sustainable. And the grassroots change movement, which this new Aquarian energy, which we're moving into March next year, Pluto moves into Aquarius. So, things are going to start rapidly changing. And for us to be part of that movement, we need to have good, strong energy, clear mind, strong heart, then we can show up and play our part, because we all have something to contribute at this time. We all have something to offer.
Yes. And, as you were saying this, I was just going to the Avatar movies. We just watched the other day, Avatar 2, and, even though, of course, it's a action movie and all of that, but the messages behind, I think that those are the things that we're talking about. A lot of it is that connection, that understanding of the interconnectedness of things, and understanding you need to step away at this time, or you need to actually lean in at this time, and what's appropriate. And of course the movies are movies, but the messages behind them, I think that is important. And as you're saying, the being able to understand how we can do this ourselves and with others, finding that tribe, those people that are supporting of our own process. And it doesn't need to be that they are doing the exact same thing. It just needs to be that they are doing something, as you were saying, standing in their own truth. I don't need my truth to be your truth. I just need to know, okay, you're standing in your truth. You're not just, being pushed by all of these different things happening. You're actually standing in your truth. I am standing in my truth. Yes, there's some common points there, but not everything is the same. And I don't need it to be, because we are unique. So by me understanding that, and understanding we're not alone, we don't have to do this alone, and the power of that collective, this is what's moving things. So balancing that place of, self-responsibility, doing my own work, and in connection, in relationship, in relation to others, to co-create what world we want. And this world that, at least for me, and I know for you, that we envision this world that is happening soon, hopefully, but that is happening. And we can get there, but we need to actually take the actions and change and make the shifts to actually get there. So it's this beautiful dance with the co-creation of what we can envision and what we are doing in this moment. And I think those two things are so important. So and can you share, Cameron, as well, you were talking about the different pathways that you're creating. I know that you have, besides your book, Heartfelt Living, that is both a book and audiobook. You narrated it all as well, so you're here, Cameron's voice. You have a few online courses that are coming out soon, right?
Yeah. So throughout January, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday in January is a 3-series course. So 1 hour, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 2 different time zones to allow for the people from all around the world. And so the first one is called Awakening. So it's really looking at, waking up, and what are the 5 stages of a wake-up call? So how do we see where we are in this phase of awakening, and how do we engage that more consciously? The second one is called Now is the Entry Point. So a lot of the times we think, I've got to wait till circumstances are better, or, I've got more money, or the kids leave home, or, my relationship's better, or whatever it is. We've got ideas about, let's start this at the perfect time. It's no, boom, now's the moment. And when we show up and get really present, then we start to create present time forward. So that course is all about that. Then the third one is called Change is a Beautiful Thing. So, in Chinese medicine, we recognize there are 5 laws of change. So when we're going through our changes, we can be conscious of which phase of change we're in, and which one of those laws can we use to assist our change and assist our transformations. And then the last one is called Finding Your Way. So it's more teachings on the soul and the heart, mind, body, soul relationship, and how to listen for the soul calling. So the soul's always signaling, but unless we know these teachings, we have no idea of knowing how to hear that. And these come as an outgrowth of years and years of leading retreats, taking people on a little journey where they go through, their life, and we sort of track through these teachings step by step, because what I've recognized is that if you don't have a framework that enables you to sort of put it all together, it's hard to navigate, moment to moment and, the year by year, because you don't sort of have a sense of the whole picture. So some years ago, when we just started You Being You, I was up in Seattle, and a friend of mine who's a neuroscientist, I was telling her about this, and she said, oh, okay, so maps of the territory by the people living in it. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what this is. These are ancient wisdom maps that you can look to use to see where you are in your journey, what's changing for you, and how to consciously activate your own evolution. Because we are here at this time because we've chosen to be here, and the opportunities are beyond what we can even imagine. So having a sense of how to play this time of awakening is what that whole little series is about. And you can take one little course or take them all. So they're designed as their own, but as a sequence, a really cool way to get into the energy of 2023 and, shift along. So I'm passionate about doing these groups because I want to introduce new healing models that bring people together to share these ancient wisdom teachings, connect with themselves and each other at deeper levels, and know how to talk about this stuff, because the world needs more healers. There are a lot of people who are coaches, teachers, yogis, who are out there in a position of influence, and there are lots of people that need help. So when more people have these teachings, they can spread them around. And, having studied myself for 40 years, various healing and yoga and cross-cultural wisdom teachings, I've kind of taken the bits that speak loudest to me and put them together in little pathways to give people some orientation tools for navigating this time of change. That's what the book is. So the first little course is called Awakening, and then the next ones that follow on after that, as part of the course, you also get the audio book. So reference material to help you flesh out your understandings. And my dream is I'd love people to come and do these little courses together, sit on the couch together and do it together, and then chat about it afterwards and share what you're learning. Or maybe you're in London and you've got a friend in France, you both do it, and then you've got a little study buddy. So these are great teachings to share. They're very simple, they're very plain, and they're easy.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I think, especially for these times, we need things to be easy, things to be grounded, but not serious. And, you referenced at the very beginning that fun, we need that aspect of fun in our life, especially a lot of times when it comes to spiritual teachings or, some of these ancient wisdom traditions. I think there's a tendency to make it quite serious. And it's not that it's not a serious matter. It's just, we can be light as we are. We can be light, exploring it. And we, as you're saying, we can connect and meet each other in that space and use this as reference points and, and as those pathways or frameworks that most of us, we don't grow up with this. Most of us, we are aimlessly going through life, and it's okay, now there's this framework. So I do recommend everybody to come and check them out. If you do any New Year's resolutions and you know that you actually don't stick to them, perhaps this would be something great to do, to have something that you're committing. It's at the very beginning of the year, and then you can use them for everything else. So I will put all of the links on the show notes so that you can access it easily. Also on youbeingyou.org or on CameronTukapua.com. So we'll have all of that there so that everybody can check it out, as well as check out the book, Heartfelt Living, if that's something that you're interested in. Lastly, Cameron, before we go, I wanted to ask you, at this moment, whatever comes for you, what is the one thing that you wish to tell everyone?
Trust yourself. And by that, I mean self with a capital S. In yoga, we talk about the self as supreme consciousness. In Chinese medicine, it's the consciousness of the heart. So in the background of our lives is the consciousness of the whole cosmos. And our personal portal to that consciousness is the heart. So as we start to awaken to our own awareness and, get clearer and lighter, we get more information coming our way. We tune in, we get more intuition, we get more flashes of awareness that help us tune into what the right thing to do is. And that deep calling that's all the time twittering away in your ear, trust that.
Beautiful.
Your big self knows exactly what you're here for. And if you've been playing small your whole life and you don't have any ways to connect with your big self, change that.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Cameron, for like always being here, for your presence, for all of the gifts that you're bringing through. Everybody listening, thank you for being there. If you're listening to this before the end of the year, happy holidays, happy new year. And I hope that you're able to take something that resonated from this conversation with you for a start. And as Cameron said, and as one of the courses are, the moment for change is now. So use this moment to change. So thank you, Cameron, and thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for your wonderful contribution to raising the consciousness of the people, and the way that you bring these people forward and this lovely range of people is beautiful contribution and offering. So thank you for your time and energy. It's always inspiring to see someone, your age and stage who's so awake and aware. And I feel like that's what we're doing here. We're helping people realize that living awake and aware is fun and gives us so many more options and choices.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.